Breaking the gray.
Sarah, it's 2023, and the funny thing is, I was like, let's start off differently this season. Let's like do something wild and not have me talking in the beginning. And I'm doing exactly the same thing I always do. I'm talking in the beginning. So why don't you talk? And I'm excited to see you. And I'll shut up. Go.
Wow. Well, it's great to see you, Russ. It's good to
Great
be
to
here.
see
I'm
you.
in my secret location outside.
That's nice. And we were just commenting on how vibrant you look with the lighting and the sun. You look like you're in your element.
Yes, thank you for not mentioning the mullet. It's good to be here. And it's really good because I am at my secret location, but I'm in Austin. And so it's so fabulous that we have our guest, Freddie Kimmel, on, our repeat guest.
He's back. He's back. Freddie's back. Yes.
And it's so great because I'm in the same physical space. So I also get to hang out with him. So that's really cool.
Freddie, have you been?
I've been great. I was just going to say the irony is, like, when you're recording multiple guests at the same time in a podcast, you would try to imagine the logistics of me and Sarah both being at the same place and then maybe just you on one end. And it's really hard, Russ. So we literally have to use technology to make this happen, which is ironic to me.
Yeah. It's ironic. And, we were commenting on this, and you had said something when we were just chatting earlier. 2022 felt like the great breakout of the bubble year where everybody was like, let's go travel. I mean, if I look at our expenses from 2023, our 2022, our expenses, we spent all of our money on travel. We just were like, let's just go anywhere we possibly can go because COVID's over. And so you traveled the world. Sarah's traveling. We're all out and about, but I'm still sitting here in my house recording this as you are both in Austin enjoying yourselves.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I did the same thing. I just actually busted open like some W-2s yesterday, and I was like, I think my sigh of relief is that I'll be able to write off everything, every airplane, every meal. I'm just, yeah, it was wild the amount of money I spent on traveling the globe and having experiences aligned with health and wellness and learning. We talk about all these events like Bulletproof or Biohacking Congress or Health Optimization Summit that we went and immersed ourselves in to learn from other people and really understand what, for me, it's like, what is healing? I keep asking myself and redefining that question.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, Sarah and I have spent a lot of time talking about how we wanted to approach this season, and we combined, we're 100 years old. And you would never tell on our faces that Sarah's 30 and I'm 70. But the fact that we're 100 combined, I think we both are like, what can we proactively do and share on our journey to feel younger, look younger too, but what are the things that we can do to do that? And, I went to England for the first time last year, and I understand why Sarah is obsessed with red light, because there's limited light in the wintertime for her. And that obsession is important because of where she lives and how she deals with things. But when we think about aging and we think about the things that we really need to do, we've talked to a lot of experts here, but like, what are the things that you notice with people that aren't really taking care of themselves, and what would you say to them to kind of kick it off and get started of like, where do you go and how do you get younger faster?
Yeah, it's interesting. I tend to, I want to acknowledge that I sort of live in a bubble of Austin, Texas. And I live in a bubble of wellnesspreneurs and wellness influencers who are not only elites, but they're really, these are people who meditate every day. They only eat grass-fed and grass-finished. They are in the ice bath. They do all the things. So I feel like there's multiple ways to answer this question. And I think it's helpful to put the filter on. I want to speak to the people still eating candy bars. I want to speak to the people that are going to. Sarah's like, that's high.
That's me.
I want to speak to the people that go and they would go enjoy a movie, but maybe they get a couple large sodas covered with like the most toxic seed oil butter you could imagine, and all the trans fats. So it's really interesting. I think within this wellness container, and I'll just mention like the red light, or let me do an example of a hyperbaric chamber. These are wildly effective technologies that will make a shift. But what I come back to is it's a finite amount of time. And there's a finite amount of time in which that technology is going to make change in the cell. And then you're left with yourself again. You're left with your life choices. You're left with your emotional body. So that's the biggest thing for me. It's like how people are aging. It's what are the words that you use to talk to your body every day? How do you respond to other people? How do you manage stress? What's your emotional intelligence in an A/B conversation, so you can really navigate that with grace and actually feel filled up after the conversation? Because I witness people all the time. It's like a buzzer, and it's kind of like a superpower, but also a curse. And I'll give you an example. This is really good. So I was texting with my partner yesterday, who we all know. I'll just refer to as my partner because I don't want to name names. And we were texting back and forth, and she goes, 18 minutes of traffic. This is a nightmare. And like, I was like, oh. Or is traffic possibly an extended duration in which you can anticipate the gentle hands and lips of your lover? Like I immediately, when people frame it bad, I'm like, that could be this. And so I have this sheet that I often look at. It's like feelings and needs. And I try not to put it on the wheel of good or bad. I try to put it on the wheel of, isn't that interesting? What's the lesson here?
Well, first of all, Freddie, I want to say thank you for acknowledging like the kind of the bubble of Austin and some of the biohacker things. Because one of the things I have is I'm here, I'm all excited. There's an ice tub next to me, the fridge is full of all good stuff. When I go back to England, it's not like that. And, I stand in a kind of a damp, freezing cold bathroom looking at the bathtub thinking, oh my God, should I put ice cubes in this? And I think, God, in Austin, they just don't know. Would they do it if they were kind of standing here in this kind of dreary, damp, totally different vibe? And also things like hyperbaric oxygen, most people don't even know what that is. Most people don't have a clue what that is. Most people really don't really know what red light is. And when you talk about kind of changing your mindset, that's also sometimes easier said than done. I quite often get in traffic and drive myself nuts. I'm driving around the M25 constantly to kind of frame it. Oh, this is an opportunity for me to meditate. I think there's a space between that where you have to learn how to make that mental shift before you can make it. Otherwise, it's kind of false, because actually I'm furious at the traffic and kind of telling myself that I like it because I can meditate. That kind of doesn't, in Kristin's words, doesn't jam. You kind of, there needs to be a way to get yourself in that kind of mental state. And I think for a lot of people, they're not living in this kind of ideal world where you have a lot of tools available. For a lot of people, mainly the main tool they have is just their mind. You can't change that environment. For a lot of people, they're in a situation where they can't afford to buy grass-fed beef. They can't afford to go to a cryo chamber or do all that, but you can afford to change your mindset around it. So that is the main question I have. How would you do it? How do you do it? Yeah,
Russ, do you want to add something?
You stick in your two pennies worth, Russ.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah, this is something that is so important, and I had a situation recently with my partner where she was naming how she was feeling in such a negative way. I won't say what it was because it's related to what she does for a living, and by naming it, she named it so terrible. It was such a toxic name for it. How she was feeling. That like she just fed into this belief that that's what she was and that's where she was, and it compounded into this like anxiety. And I just recall the amount of times I've listened to the audiobook from Eckhart Tolle and the amount of times I've read it. And I just recently finished this Rick Rubin book on the creative act, the way of being. I'm showing the circle and dot. The idea of knowing when you're triggered, knowing that it's coming, and knowing the feeling that you have when you're triggered to say, this traffic sucks. I feel blank, 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 and to do something about it. But it's the trick of what do you do? Like, how do you train yourself? Because I can read all the books in the world, but how do you train yourself to react differently?
Yeah, you need a better toolbox. So the thing actually have this. I have my toolbox on my desk. I have this sheet, and it's from a group of a pair of women called Be Loved Now. I'll try to hold this up, and this is just a feelings and needs worksheet. This stems from nonviolent communication, but what I have to do as a human being to disarm that experience, so it's a growth opportunity. I'm in traffic and I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling, I'm going through my sheet here. I'm feeling livid. I'm feeling repulsed because I have the need for, and then I go over to my need sheet. I have the need for ease. I have the need for flow. I have the need for connection. I have the need for integrity based on somewhere I had an agreement to be. So all of a sudden, as opposed to just me not being able to do anything, I'm like, wait, these are just validated feelings that I'm having based on a need that's not being met in this moment. And this right here, like a feelings and needs, if you don't know nonviolent communication, if you don't have this, like make one. I have one in my book bag. I have one in my car. I have one on my desk. And until you start to expand your emotional vocabulary, because I've got 20 different words here for anger and frustration. Here's a great one: ways to feel vulnerable, ashamed, exposed, embarrassed, fragile, guarded, insecure, self-conscious, sensitive, shaky, unworthy, vulnerable. Here's ones for joy: giddy, glad, grateful, honest, happy, humble, inspired, invigorated, jazzed, joyful. When you start, it's like you start to paint with more colors. You're going to be a better artist when you master it. Not you're never going to master it, but you will be better if we do this every day. And I just think this is a baseline. Why the fuck aren't we teaching this in grade school?
Yeah.
Nobody
Totally.
ever asked
Yeah.
me about how I felt or what I was, my anger or rage. It was like, calm the rage, calm the anger, sit in the corner. You've been bad. Don't do that again. There was no emotional processing. So this is why we live in the world we live in today, which is, people could argue on some level it's dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm, I'm just because I'm proud of myself right now. I'm using the word pride because I'm going to quote my second book in this podcast. It's probably the first time I've ever quoted two books, but the Brene Brown book that just came out does exactly that, and she talks about this concept of the fact that we only use 8 words to define how we feel. I'm stressed, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm happy, but the depth of the words and what they mean, and being able to like name things at a deeper level, like when you said your definitions for joy in there, joy and honesty, that's two completely different things, but the emotion you feel is similar. So I think as humans, we probably want to name something because it feels the same way, but the underlying word or the thing that we're actually going through is different, but we might feel the same way. We're happy, but what is the meaning behind the happiness? Like maybe that is something that we need to kind of explore a little bit more.
Yeah. And then what do you do once you've identified the emotion? Because I understand, you identify the emotion, but then it's about, flipping it round or changing your mental state or having some kind of reframe. What's your process for that?
Yeah. So you want to identify the need that is or is not being met based on the feeling. I'm feeling angry. Let me give you an example. When you walked in the house and dropped your bags on the floor and made a big huff, and then you didn't look at me in the eye and you walked right into the bedroom, I felt angry, frustrated, and slighted because I have the need. I have the need for connection. I have the need for ease. I have the need for harmony. I have the need for understanding. Whatever that is, you have to like put this. We've identified some feelings and needs. You got to put it on something. So this is where the practice comes in. When you do that, and I had a couple moments yesterday, I was like, oh, I can't say what I'm feeling right now. Because it was a very negative, dark feeling. I was like, I can't manage this right now. What's happening in front of me? There's too much. It's too much bullshit coming at me. But if I would have just, and it was a moment where I forgot, where I could have been like, oh, this is some ugly stuff I'm feeling because I have the need. I have a core need that's not being met. And all of a sudden another person can see that and they can meet you where they're at, and then they can do it. You know, so you can go back and forth, and it's pretty simple. You know, it's based on the eight spiritual guiding principles, and it's just, you know, like your book, Russ, kind of, it's weaving you closer to oneness, which, let's just be honest, we're not. We're imperfect, we're flawed. To be human is to be in pain and be in suffering. Everything that we have that we love will be taken away. That's what we're here doing. So don't give me rose-colored glasses. What I want you to do is to understand, again, being beautifully broken, understand this silo that we are working in, that is to be on the planet for 100 years. And what are the tools you're going to bring to the table to navigate that? I think this ties all back into how we age.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, what you just said is so important, and it's why we're still here, by the way. If you're a Buddhist, it's why we're still on this planet and why we're living, because we are imperfect beings. If we were perfect, we wouldn't be here as human beings to try to, you know, resolve our past lives and resolve all the shit that we have done wrong. You know, all of this is to improve. But one thing you said, Freddie, that I want to make sure we point out is the need for connection, and the need to connect at a different level with the people in your lives. And I have 3 older children, and I have connected with them in very toxic ways when they were younger. I went through a divorce, and I think that the way they were used in our divorce was awful. And I recognized it early, and I think recognizing the impact on them allowed me to see, oh shit, I am acting like a complete selfish, narcissistic asshole. I need to not make my problems their problems. And I made an immediate change because I saw from a young child's face that disconnecting from them and letting them be a child and not be my caretaker was an important thing. And I think the same with the connection is so important, because you can actually see the impact you're making on somebody, and vice versa, right? And maybe that's something we have to hold on to, is that connection piece that is so important.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I just want to, you know, whether it's empowering or it drives you to make a change out of fear, every action is going to have a reaction. If you think about the universal connection that everything in this universe on this planet is a vibratory pattern, it's like, think about the universe as a big bed sheet. And if we push our finger up through the bed sheet somewhere here, it's going to get tighter somewhere else. And that might sound esoteric or not easy to apply to your life, but I promise you, for like these violent, unchecked, poorly managed emotional outbursts, there's a reaction. There's a cost to that down the road. That could be cost to your hippocampus or hypothalamus, doubling down on that loop where you're just going to loop into this negative thought cycle. It could be a neurotransmitter. It could be cortisol. It could be long-term sleep. I'm going to tell you, here's a great example because they're in the news all the time. Look at people in Hollywood who have been sober for 30 years versus people who like live the Hollywood lifestyle. They look like death. Maybe there's some other things they've done to sell their soul to be able to get these, whatever the lifestyle is. But I look at that all the time. I'm like, oh my God, that person looks amazing. Like, or they look horrible at like 40.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What I think, Freddie, and I'm really glad we're talking to you at the start of this journey, because Russ and I are actually going to implement a lot of these anti-aging and longevity tips that we get along the way. But do you think like this emotional piece is, and certainly connection with other people, probably has higher priority? I mean, we're going to talk about, we'll talk about alcohol, we'll talk about diet, we'll talk about supplements, we'll talk about nootropics, all these things you can do. But this piece about human connection and dealing with your emotions, do you not think actually from even a chronic disease point of view, this is probably fundamental? You know, if you're going into like a diet, but you haven't actually fixed your mindset and you're still getting angry every day, you know, is the diet going to work?
I've had people tell me, they're like, well, I think this is first and this is first. And I always kind of put the 3 things. I look at breath, water, and food. Like those are pretty important to us. Breath, water, and food. And on a pyramid, you can go a really long time. So I put food at the bottom, right? You can go a long time without food. You can go even less time without water. You can go less time without breath, which obviously, learning how to breathe. We do 20,000 breaths every day. It's so paramount. Most people they don't think about it until they realize, I haven't taken a deep. Do you ever get to the end of the workday? You're like,
yeah, I do, for sure.
You're like, holy crap, my body was just on a roller coaster for 8 hours of clutching the wheel. What was I doing to myself? I mean, that is a great example of hyperaging. Now, I will tell you, all that the food, the water, and the breath can all be, there's a container that lives around that, which is your emotional intelligence, how you're framing anything and everything. Every bite of food, every handshake, every way you'll open the door. Sometimes I'll get in the car, and I know we've all got in the car. We like throw our water bottle and our gym shit down in the seat, and you get 4 days later, you're like, oh my God, there's like a homeless person living in my car. What's happening? And then you can get in, and you're just like kind of with ease. You're going to set things down. You go into the building with like a different energy and intention. It's that net effect over, we're talking about living for 100 years. There is a biological cost to that. There is an effect on longevity and aging. Hypertension alone, right? And this is scientifically proven across the board.
Yeah, I wonder really whether it is the fundamental, do happy people live longer? And I suspect the answer is yes, of course. That is a fundamental thing. If you're not happy, if you're not connected, if you're not joyous, if you're not reframing everything to kind of get your needs met, as you would say, these other things, they're only going to get you so far because you're still living at that kind of low vibration.
And there's that thing, Sarah, that we've talked about a lot around sickness and mental health, around creating the sickness in your mind, and then your body feels sick. Like, I can honestly say, in my 20s, I probably gave myself cancer. And in that I was told by my partner, whatever you do, don't get cancer, because her boyfriend from high school died from cancer. I'm like, cancer? What, are you kidding me? Like, I'm 20 years old. Why would I ever get cancer? Boom, 6 months later, I had cancer. And I mean, my mental thought process was, oh my God, I don't want to get cancer. Oh, what if I got cancer? And then I was living the life in my brain of like, what would happen if I got cancer? I'd have to leave college. I'd have to get chemotherapy. I'd lose all my hair. I'd become 5 pounds. And I remember that Michael Keaton movie, My Life. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to record a video for my future children. And boom, I got cancer. I mean, my whole mental being was avoiding it and thinking about it. And I became it. And I truly believe, my therapist and I have talked about this a lot, like that was a leading indicator of me getting into a cancer mindset and getting cancer. It was weird, but our brains are pretty powerful things.
Well, it's also down to if you just wanted to break it down into basic physics, the idea of thoughts and emotional intelligence, or emotions, do have a charge in the body, which is, you can measure different emotions with heat patterns, with thermography. And if we look at the law of attraction, it's all magnetic. You're going to have a different magnetic flow of electrons that are going to attract experiences. You're going to call them in. I'll give you another great partner story, since we're just telling partner stories today, is that I just went to Maui in December, and my partner booked the housing in June. And she got this deal. She said, this looks great. It's great. It's probably fraudulent, but it looks great. All the way up to the trip. Can you imagine if we got there and we didn't have anywhere to stay? What'll happen when we get there and it's fraud? Driving up to the place, hope there's some place here. We land at the place, it's fraud. There is no home. We're out $5,000 day one, looking at $20,000 to but like, this was a great example of a deep knowing that something was off, and you use humor to diffuse. So you get up to the thing, and then it hits, and then it's like, it hurts extra worse. Because you knew the whole time, there was something in your psyche that knew just a fraction of a degree, and we always ignore that inner voice. So it's manifesting, or do you attract that experience into reality?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, there's a whole field of science, psychoneuroimmunology, that deals with just this. It deals with how your mental state affects your physical state and causes illness. And and even you're going a step further and saying, you're either pulling these experiences in, or you're ignoring that intuition, that gut feeling that we have, and that we kind of, as humans, we seem to be moving further away from, especially, you know, with technology, it kind of takes us even further as we rely on other sources other than ourselves. So tapping into that intuition, into that feeling, watching our emotional state, I really do. I'm coming to think now that that's probably the most important thing for your health.
I think so. I mean, it was Wim Hof who injected himself with botulism,
Yeah.
and he was able to blunt his immune response to having a fever spike or being ill, and then taught other people to do it, 10 newbies in like a week and a half, 2 weeks. It's not, you know, it's things we believed were out of our control because it didn't work in a Newtonian physics type of way, but there is power behind that breath and the thought. I almost look at like breath work as like it's like a deep clean of the house. It's like it's like prepping the terrain for the thoughts to be more effective, and because there's so many mechanisms downstream that are complementary to that.
Yeah, it's an immediate forced get you into moments and being aware of right now. Like that breath is like so important for you to like stop, turn this off. You have to forcefully pull something into your body and push it back out, which brings you present. And I think the presence thing is it's so underrated. It's and no one really understands it until you start to do that work and you're like, oh my God, that flower. Like, where did a flower come from? And you know that something amazing just happens when you stop all the storytelling in your brain and just stop for a second. And breathing is the thing you need to do first, probably, right? I mean, I'm a novice at it, but I feel like this is the one skill set where Sarah and I, when we talk about this, is the thing I have tried to work on so much because I see it, I feel a difference. I see a difference. And when I can be present and go outside and take my shoes off and forage, as Sarah has taught me, and look at the trees and look at the clouds and enjoy it, like it's everything else sort of washes away. You're not really thinking about anything else except for that moment with that tree and that mushroom on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so powerful.
Brilliant. Well, I feel like we're kind of off to a good start, Russ. No, I think this is a good baseline for us because having this understanding that, okay, the first thing, we're on this longevity journey, but the first thing, let's get our mental state right. Let's get our emotions right. Let's get one of these sheets, like Freddie said, and start to turn that around. Because I think, yeah, the other stuff is interesting and we're going to talk to a lot of experts, but this piece, I think, is the fundamental, how you actually frame things, what your thoughts are. Being on top of that is a baseline to go forward and do all of the other longevity hacks. So thank you, Freddie. We're so honored to have you on again, number 2, second time round. And thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're also busy doing all your stuff.
Of course, anytime. These are the conversations that we're supposed to be having, you know. And as we go out and do our work, I am increasingly aware of how important it is, these basic I say basic bitch operating principles. I joke, but I'll often have an experiment at the end of the night where I write down like my 10 just non-starters, like above anything else that you have to do if you really, really want to thrive. And certainly this conversation that we're having here, it sets the tone to all the work. You know, it's like, you know, as we interact with each other, we're much like a quantum computer. We're taking in incredible amounts of information, moment to moment, second to second. And it's like, what's the computer spit out? You know, you're gonna change the algorithm when you start to do stuff like this. So I think as simple as like 3 minutes in the morning, like a couple things that I've done just to curtail. I know I've noticed that like as the podcast and everything starts to pick up heat and steam, I'm more pulled to like check numbers and look at my phone and post on social media. And what I really need to do is I needed to like, there's an element of like emptiness that comes along with that because it's not great engagement. So I like put an app on my phone to like, there's no social media between like 9 a.m. and 5. Like I can post really early when I get up, or like I can check it at the end of the night. Other than that, it's like literally I can't find it on my phone. So stuff like that gives me space to sit down and check in with myself a couple times in the day and say, well, what am I feeling? Or like a 5 minutes at the end of the night. If somebody wanted a simple go-to, write 5 minutes to your organs at night. How are you guys all feeling? Does anybody feel stressed? My colon? Well, what do you feel? You feel tightness. What's the tightness feel? Oh, it's connected with a sense of abandonment. That's interesting. You know, I've had wild like shifts in sleep scores and stuff just by like intentionally journaling to my body. So there's 100 ways to do it.
No, that's a good tip. It's a good tip, and it's certainly a good place to start. Russ, you need that app, don't you, for your morning
I do.
scrolling? You need one that stops you looking at the news.
I need
also
that.
not
I need
a good
that
place
box.
to start your day.
Yeah, I need that box to just throw my phone in there, because the first thing I do is grab my phone every morning. I've been getting better. I've been actually getting better at it, but it's awful. It's, you know,
It's awful because also, like Freddie said, what are you taking in? What is the information you're taking in? And of course, if we're taking in some horrible thing that's happened on the news as, you know, the first piece of nutrition for the day, you know, that's...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it's not a good place to start.
You're plugged into a system that our system is driven on capitalism. So your algorithms on your phone is targeting things that are going to trigger you into a state where you are a buyer. Period. That's it. It's not happenstance randomness. There's an organic search rate on Instagram of 6 to 7%. They're giving you stuff to drive you in a mode. So I say if you want to put your hands on the steering wheel, and it's hard. This is a dopamine hit. You know, it's real. So it's this very clever little system that you really have to intentionally work yourself out of if you want things to be different. And I just said that the other day. I said I want more life back. I want higher quality of life. I want more joy. I'm going to start with this app, which is called Opal, which is $100. I'm like, I'm paying $100 to not be able to use my phone.
Turn it off.
But you know what?
Yeah.
You know what? I've said it enough, and I'm drawing a line in the sand. You know, self starter. That happens to be a superpower that I have. When I'm ready, I'm ready. I'm not fucking around or being like, "Well, what's the best way?" I'm gonna do it.
And that probably comes from practice, Freddie. I expect you're like that through practice, because every time you do it, you flex that muscle. Every time you set that boundary or you set intentionality, you build up the strength to be able to do it again the next time.
Well, it's also trusting yourself too. It's trusting that you're ready because you know you're ready, right? Versus like, oh, this is risky. I don't want to actually do that. But no, you know you're ready, and that's because you've done the work, Freddie, and you know that.
You've done the work. Yeah, that's what it is. It's doing the work. Yeah. Yeah, cool.
Freddie, we can all find you at beautifullybroken.world. Is that correct?
That's the website, and then the podcast is the Beautifully Broken Podcast on all platforms that podcasts are listened to.
Amazing. Yet again, world changing. You're amazing. Thank you for being amazing and changing people's lives. And you know, Sarah and I can add another year to our lives after this podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's add 10.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah,
we're limiting ourselves already, Russ.
Yeah, I know.
Great. That's brilliant. Thank you so much again, Freddie. All the best. Take care.
Breaking the gray.